Rejected, humiliated, and left with nothing but shattered pride, Velra disappeared into the forest the night her alpha mate rejected her in front of the entire pack. Everyone assumed she would die out there, broken, forgotten, erased. But Velra didn't die. She thrived. Years later, whispers spread of a mysterious rogue pack rising in strength. At its head stands a Luna whose power, loyalty, and magic are unlike anything the world has ever seen. When Alpha Drennan crosses paths with her again, he doesn't find the timid girl he once turned away. He finds a formidable leader, a woman who built her own kingdom from ashes, alongside a chosen family of misfits and monsters, and guarding one devastating secret. They share a child. This is a full-length, emotionally charged werewolf romance, a story of rejection, revenge, redemption, and a love that burns like wildfire beneath the moonlight. Chapter 1. The full moon hung high above the Everglen clearing, casting its pale glow over the assembled Crescent Fang pack. Tonight was supposed to be a night of celebration, of unity, bonding, and mate pairings. Wolves circled the firelight, joy spilling from their throats in howls of anticipation. But not for she stood alone, trembling beneath a silken wrap of midnight blue. Her silver blonde hair spilled down her back in soft waves, and the long sleeves of her ceremonial robe clung to her delicate arms. The wind whispered through the pine trees, and with every passing second, her heart pounded louder against her ribcage. She could feel him, Alpha Adrenan, her fated mate. The bond had awakened that morning. She had collapsed to the floor of her shared home, gasping for breath as her soul burned with recognition. The Alpha had found his mate, and it was her, the shy daughter of a disgraced warrior. An orphan, a wolf who barely even shifted during moon phases. The mate bond had wrapped itself around her bones and pulsed with certainty. But when he stepped toward her that night, flanked by warriors and the snarling Gamma who had always mocked her, something inside her froze. "Vela," Drennan said, voice cold. "Come forward." She stepped forward, eyes wide, every cell in her body vibrating with the pull of their shared fate. The moment she looked into his ice-blue eyes, the bond sizzled to life. He felt it too. He stiffened. Then he stepped back. "What is this?" one of the elders whispered. "I reject you," Drennan said, flatly, loudly, without a flicker of hesitation. GPS. The entire pack stopped moving. Velra blinked, frozen. "No," her voice cracked. You can't. You feel it. You know." He looked down at her like she was an insect. "You are weak," he said. "Timid. You are no Luna." The words hit harder than claws. The pack didn't speak. They didn't need to. The air said it all. Rejection, humiliation, death. Velra turned and ran. Period. Tears freezing on her cheeks. Her wolf howled deep within. Wounded beyond words. Her soul tore at itself. The barn ripped down the center like parchment, set aflame. Her foot caught a root. She tumbled into mud, then scrambled back up. Keep moving. Her instinct screamed, "Don't stop." She didn't. Even when the pain pulsed so hard she vomited behind a tree, she didn't stop. By morning, she had reached the edge of the forest, the place the pack called the Wound. No one went farther. It was cursed, they claimed, tainted by rogue magic and old blood. Perfect. She crossed into the mists without looking back. Velra collapsed in a ring of shadowed trees, too numb to weep anymore. The rejection echoed inside her, like a bell tolling her death sentence. But as the sun rose and light filtered through the cursed canopy, something stirred nearby. A crunch of branches, a low growl. Velra's blood froze. A rogue. She turned her face away. "Get it over with," she whispered. But the rogue didn't lunge. Instead, it stepped forward, cautious, then shifted, and before her stood a woman, older, lean, with a deep scar down her cheek and gold tattoos over her collarbone. "You smell like broken fate," the stranger said. Vela barely lifted her head. "I was rejected." The woman crouched beside her. "Good. We only take the broken." Vela blacked out. When she awoke, she was in a stone cavern lit by fireflies. Wolves half-shifted, scarred, strange, moved in and out like shadows. A boy with frost-cold eyes offered her water. A girl with bark-colored skin and glowing fingers stitched a wound in her side she didn't remember getting. "You're safe now," someone murmured. Velra tried to sit up. "Where am I?" A new voice, deep and calm, answered from the shadows. "With the one's fate forgone," he said. The voice belonged to the rogue Alpha, who would become her protector, the man who would help her survive, and the first male who would never reject her again. But deep in the Crescent Fong Pax territory, Drennan lay awake, haunted by the sharp pull in his chest that wouldn't go away. He had done what was expected of him, what was logical. Aluna needed strength, not her. So why, when he closed his eyes, could he still smell her? Why did the rejection feel like a mistake? Chapter 2. The forest beyond the wound was not just cursed, it was wild. Velra stumbled through it for hours, bleeding from a scrape on her thigh and bruises she couldn't remember getting. Her robe snagged on blackthorn branches, the once delicate silk, now shredded like her pride. Twice she tried to shift. Twice her wolf refused. She wasn't surprised. The bond rejection had shattered something in her core. Wolves didn't respond well to heartbreak, and hers was barely holding together. The mists deepened as night fell, curling around her ankles, her throat, her mind. The trees whispered in languages she didn't recognize. Strange symbols glowed faintly on rocks. She was certain she saw something, someone watching her from the shadows more than once. Velra's breathing became ragged. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't go back. At some point, minutes, hours, she collapsed at the edge of a ravine. Her body gave out before her mind could protest. A whisper of a whimper escaped her lips as she curled into herself like a broken thorn. "This is where I die," she muttered aloud, voice cracking. She closed her eyes. Waiting for a beast, a rogue, anything to come and finish her. But nothing came. Just silence, then a voice. Not cruel, not mocking, gentle. "You again." Velra's eyes shot open. It was the same woman with gold tattoos from before. Crouched beside her again, just as before. "You're real," Velra whispered. The woman nodded. "Name's Sadur." Velra blinked at her, dazed. "I thought I hallucinated you." "You did?" Cutter said dryly. "But I showed up anyway." She held out a hand. Her fingers were calloused but warm. Velra hesitated, then grasped it. Ser pulled her to her feet. "You have two choices," she said. "Keep wandering and let the forest take you, or come with me and learn to never meet a pack to survive again." Velra stared at her. "Why would you help me?" Ser's gaze darkened. "Because I was you once." Ser led her through a hidden trail carved into the thickest part of the forest. Strange animals watched them from trees, some with too many eyes, others with glowing antlers. Velra shivered. This forest isn't cursed. Ser said, as if reading her mind. It's ancient. It doesn't forget pain. That's all. Velra swallowed. Are we in rogue territory? Ser paused, then nodded. You're not the first to be thrown away, Velra, but you might be one of the few willing to fight back. They entered a massive stone cove, a hidden sanctuary draped in vines, glowing fungi, and underground springs. Figures moved in the shadows, their voices soft and cautious. A fire crackled in the center of a natural circle. And a large wolf sat near it, half-shifted with glowing scars across his shoulders. He stood as approached. Another crescent fong stray? He asked. Calder. No, said Ser. This one's different. The wolf stepped forward and studied Velra. You smell like rejection and moonlight, he said. Velra flinched. Ser touched her arm. You're safe here for as long as you choose to be. The rogue alpha extended his hand. My name's Coring. Welcome to the Hollow Circle. Velra blinked came at him. Then at the mismatched wolves behind him. Some missing limbs, others with ritual tattoos, one cradling a baby wolf cub in her arms. They were all broken and still standing. She took Corin's hand. Days passed. Velra slept in a moss-draped alcove, drank from enchanted streams, and slowly began to eat again. Her strength returned in flickers. Her wolf remained silent, but stood faintly in Cedar taught her to defend herself. You don't fight like them, Seer said. You fight like someone with something to protect. Velra blinked. I have nothing. Kra tilted her head. Not yet. On the 7th night, Velra dreamt of the bond. Only this time, it wasn't Drennan's face she saw. It was her own, stronger, wilder, marked with strange symbols that glowed like moonlight. She woke gasping, her fingers tingling. Her palm ached, and when she looked down, she saw it. A faint mark, silver, shaped like a broken crescent moon. Somewhere deep in the Crescent Fong territory. Drennan jerked awake in a cold sweat. He didn't know why, only that something or someone was calling him from far away. And for the first time in his life, he was afraid that he had made the wrong choice. Chapter 3. Velra spent the next few weeks mostly silent, watching from the shadows of the hollow circle's hidden den. These wolves weren't ordinary rogues. They were survivors, misfits, exiles. All of them had been rejected by their own packs, some by fated mates, others simply for being different. And somehow they had made something sacred here. The more she observed, the more Velra realized they didn't just survive. They lived. They trained. They built. They hunted together, laughed together, and above all, they protected each other fiercely. No rank, no alpha dominance games, just loyalty earned, not forced. Still, Velra kept her distance. She didn't trust it. This strange, warm place, carved from pain. She was broken. Yes, but that didn't mean she was ready to belong again until he found her. It was after midnight, and Velra had wandered to the edge of the sanctuary. She liked the quiet there, the cool of the moss underfoot, the sound of owls instead of the whispers of the pack. She thought she was alone until a low voice rumbled from behind her. You should be careful near the hollow's border. Not everything here is tame. Velra spun around. A tall, dark-skinned male stood a few paces away. Arms crossed over his chest. His shoulders were broad and faint runes shimmered along the line of his jaw, trailing to his collarbone. His eyes were a deep violet, almost glowing in the dark. Velra hadn't seen him before. She immediately stepped back. "I'm sorry," she said. He watched her, didn't move. "You're the new Crescent Stray," he said. After a moment, flinched at the phrase. "My name is Velra." He tilted his head. "You smell like grief." "I suppose that's accurate." The man stepped closer slowly. "I'm Malrek," he said. "I keep to the outer rim. I don't like crowds." Velra looked at him carefully. He wasn't threatening. If anything, he felt like a shadow that had seemed too much to speak loudly. "Are you a rogue?" He gave a short laugh. "A long time ago, I was an alpha heir. Then my father found out I could see things before they happened." Velra blinked. "You're a seer." "Not anymore," he said. "Now I just survive." For reasons she couldn't explain. Velra didn't walk away. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars filter through the treetops. He didn't ask questions, didn't press her to talk, just existed beside her. And for the first time since her rejection, Velra didn't feel like prey or a burden. She just felt seen. Over the next few days, Malrek found her again and again. They didn't talk much, but when they did, it was never small talk. Only real things. Pain, fear, regret, hope. Velra learned that Malrek had once had a fated mate, too. One who turned him into their alpha the moment she discovered his visions. He bore the scars across his back from the pack's punishment. "But you're still alive," Velra whispered once. Malrek gave her a ghost of a smile. "So are you." One night, as they shared roasted rabbit near a ring of glowing mushrooms, Malrek turned to her. "There's something different about you," he said quietly. Even before the mark appeared, Velra looked down at her hand. The crescent-shaped mark had grown darker, pulsing faintly when she was angry or afraid. "I don't know what it is," she admitted, "but it feels old, like I've carried it for lifetimes." Malrex's eyes shimmered. "You have?" She stared at him. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small crystal, black and purple, carved with strange lines. "This is from the Temple of the Forgotten Moon," he said. "It only glows when it finds someone cursed by fate." He handed it to her. The moment her fingers touched it, the crystal flared with light. Velra dropped it in shock. "What the?" Malrek didn't look surprised. "You're not just a rejected mate, Velra. You were born to end something or begin it." That night, Velra didn't sleep. She sat in her moss bed, the crystal still glowing faintly beside her. Her mind raced with possibilities, with fear, with questions she had no way to answer. But deep in her gut, she knew one thing. Drennan had only rejected a girl. What he didn't know was that she had become something far greater, and she wasn't done with him yet. Chapter 4. Velra stood in the center of the Hollow Circle's main courtyard, eyes closed, breath slow and even. Cutter circled her like a hawk, murmuring instructions between deliberate steps. Balance is power, not force. You won't overpower a brute by meeting him head-on. You'll win by knowing when to bend, when to strike, and when to disappear. Velra nodded again. Cutter snap. Velra ducked, twisted, rolled. Kud lunged, her claws grazing Velra's cheek. Velra snarled and countered with a spinning sweep, knocking Sayre's legs out from beneath her. The older wolf hit the dirt with a grunt and laughed. "You're finally listening." Velra was panting, but a grin tugged at the corner of her mouth. For the first time in weeks, she felt her blood burn for something other than grief. The hollow circle wasn't just a refuge, it was a crucible. Everyone there had been forged by pain, but they didn't wallow in it. They transformed it. Velra found herself waking up before dawn to train. She ran with the night patrol. She learned from the others how to track, how to fight dirty, how to use her magic, whatever it was, to her advantage. Even Malrek started teaching her how to sense the threads of fate when they brushed the surface of her thoughts. Most people ignore their instincts, he said. You'll learn to wield yours like a blade. But perhaps most importantly, Velra learned how to belong. There was Leia, the wolf with one arm and a wicked sense of humor, who taught Velra how to survive on almost nothing and still smile. There was Thor, the mute tracker, who communicated only with whistles and hand gestures, but always brought Velra the first bite of whatever he hunted. There was little Erix, no older than 10, who had escaped a burning village with no one but his cat-shifting sister, and who now clung to Velra like she was some sort of forest queen. "You smell safe," he'd said once, snuggling against her arm. The hollow circle didn't just patch Velra's wounds. They filled the empty places with something warmer than she thought she deserved. Love. One evening, as dusk fell and fireflies danced above the glowing mushrooms, Ser called Velra to the fire circle. "We're considering forming ranks," she said. "Not like in the old packs, but to prepare, to defend our own." Gong. Velra tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Corin stepped into the firelight. "It means the Hollow needs a second in command." Velra's breath caught. Ser met her eyes. "You've trained harder than any of us. You've earned trust, you've earned blood, and you've earned a family. But Velra swallowed. "I was rejected. I'm not whole." "No one here is whole," Corin said quietly. "But you're the kind of broken that makes others stronger." Velra didn't respond. She didn't need to. She simply stepped forward and knelt. From that night on, Velra became the Luna of the Hollow Circle. They didn't call her Alpha. She didn't want the title. But everyone followed her lead. Her strength came from compassion, her authority from survival. And when she spoke, they listened, not out of fear, but respect. Even her wolf stirred more frequently now, its presence no longer weak and hesitant, but watchful and steady. It still hadn't fully shifted, but Velra knew it would come, when the time was right. One night, while walking the perimeter alone, Velra felt a sharp prick of pain in her chest. A tug like a string tied to her ribcage had been yanked hard. She stopped, spun. The forest rustled. A breeze moved through the hollow's trees. But someone was close. And that string, it felt familiar. It felt like Drennan far away in Crescent Fong territory. Drennan stood over a map of his borderlands. "Rogues have been moving through the western edge," his beta murmured. "Not just passing through, gathering." Drennan narrowed his eyes. "A new threat, maybe," the beta said. "Or a new leader." Drennan's chest tightened. He hadn't spoken Velra's name in months, but he still thought of her every time the moon rose. Every time he passed the spot where he'd rejected her. Every time he saw the silver ribbon she used to wear, still hanging from a branch where she had dropped it that night. He had tried to forget her, tried to convince himself he did the right thing. But some mistakes don't fade with time. Some grow claws and fangs and return. Back in the hollow, Velra looked out across the valley, her mark glowing faintly on her palm. Whatever was pulling her, Whatever storm was coming, she would meet it head-on. She wasn't the frightened girl who had run into the woods. She was the Luna of the Hollow, and she wasn't alone anymore. Chapter 5. The forest had a way of keeping secrets, but not even the Hollow Circle could hide everything. It started with a nightmare. Velra shot upright in her moss-covered bed, heart racing, fingers clenching the fabric of her shirt soaked in sweat. She had seen eyes, not her own, not Dren's, a child's familiar, and not golden irises, surrounded by a ring of obsidian eyes that had haunted her dreams for weeks now, ever since she became second in command of the Hollow Circle. "You know what this is," Malrek said quietly that morning. They sat beneath the weeping willow that shielded the sacred spring, a pool only seers and spirit-marked wolves were allowed to touch. Velra hugged her knees. There was no time. I never even noticed." "It happens sometimes," Malrek said, "when the rejection is incomplete, if the bond was strong and the connection deeper than either of you understood." Velra shook her head. "It doesn't matter. He rejected me. He made his choice. That doesn't mean the moon didn't make hers." Later that week, Velra followed little Eric's into the deeper woods while he chased butterflies. The child's giggles were sharp relief against the weight, crushing her chest. Then Eric's froze. "What is it?" Velra crouched beside him. He pointed through a thicket. At first she saw nothing. Then movement, tiny, shaky. A boy no older than 6 or 7 stood in the clearing, shivering, barefoot, covered in mud. His clothes were torn, his lips split, and one of his knees was bloodied. He stared at them, unafraid, and his eyes, Velra's breath caught. The same eyes from her dreams, golden, surrounded by obsidian. She dropped to her knees slowly. "Hey there," she whispered. "What's your name?" The boy tilted his head. "Do you have food?" Tears prickled Velra's eyes. "Yeah," she said, "I do." The boy's name was Arvin. He didn't know who his mother was. He remembered being left behind in the woods by angry wolves. He had been surviving on roots and creek water, avoiding adults, following birds. But he recognized Velra immediately. "I saw you in the water," he said calmly. Your hand glowed. Velra blinked. "The sacred spring," he nodded. "The water told me you'd come." Ser stood behind her, arms crossed, face pale. "This child is spirit-touched." Malrek stepped closer, his voice low. "He's not just touched, he's gifted." Velra watched Arvin eat his stew like he hadn't eaten in days. Something deep in her gut pulled tight. The more she looked at him, the more she knew. The mark on her palm pulsed. Her wolf stirred. And then came the voice from within her, the one that hadn't spoken since the night of her rejection. "He is ours." That night, Velra sat beneath the stars, Arvin asleep beside her, curled against her side like he belonged there all along. "Do you think he's really mine?" she asked Ka. Ser didn't answer right away. "Your bond was unconsummated," she said, "but magic finds a way when fate burns bright enough." "You wouldn't be the first Luna to carry a child born through spiritual tethering." Velra swallowed, and the father, Ser's eyes darkened. "Drennan will come for him. You know he will." Velra looked down at the boy, her boy no longer just a stray. Not just a survivor, he was the future. The next morning, Velra awoke to a thin sheet of snow on the moss, unusual for the season. But what chilled her more was the mark glowing again on her palm, brighter, hotter, urgent. Across the woods, a horn blew, Low and angry, Corin ran from the southern ridge, eyes blazing. Scouts spotted wolves breaching the western barrier, he said. Crescent Fong banners. Velra stood slowly. No more hiding, she said, voice steel. Keter stepped forward. What will you do? Velra's jaw clenched. I'll protect my son. Chapter 6. The Crescent Fong wolves hadn't stepped beyond their border in nearly a decade. The hollow circle had thrived in the shadows, tucked beneath ancient roots and sacred magic. Never quite seen, always a rumor. Until now. Velra stood at the edge of the hollow's high ridge, wind snapping through her hair, her wolf beneath her skin, awake and fully alert for the first time since her rejection. Keter and Malrek stood behind her, eyes narrowed, tension thrumming through the air like an unsung battle cry. They came fast, Corin said, joining them. Too fast for a simple patrol. They're looking for something or someone. Velra didn't blink. They're looking for him. She looked down to the base of the ridge where Arvin played near a pond with little Eric's. Unaware of the war inching closer to his young world, the child had her stubborn chin and Drennan's haunted eyes. That night, as the hollow circle reinforced its barriers with blood magic sigils and illusion wards, Velra met with Malrek, alone in the grove of stones, the forest spiritual center. The carved runes glowed faintly on the rocks, a place for truth. You have to tell him, Malrek said quietly. Velra looked at the silver blossom tree between them. Tell Drennan he has a son. He'd only want him to use him as leverage, as a pawn. Malrek shook his head. You don't know that. She turned on him. I do. I knew him better than anyone. You thought you did. People change when they're faced with consequences they didn't expect. Velra didn't answer. Her hand brushed the mark on her palm, which had begun to throb more painfully as the Crescent Fong pack drew closer. Arvin felt it too. She'd seen it in his eyes. He was sensing something unfamiliar, dangerous. She had to decide. Confront Drennan or disappear again. But the Hollow was her family now. She was done running. At dawn, the enemy arrived. They didn't breach the Hollow yet, but they circled just outside the final barrier line, cloaked in storm gray armor, crescent wolf sigils gleaming on their chests. Velra walked out alone. She stood on the edge of the warded clearing, chin high, as the Crescent Fong pack parted to reveal him. Drennan, he hadn't changed. Still tall, still devastatingly handsome, still alpha. But there were lines in his face now, sleepless shadows under his eyes, and something uncertain behind the cold steel of his expression. They stared at each other for long seconds. Then, "You're alive," he said hoarsely. Velra arched a brow, disappointed, his jaw clenched. "No, just surprised." She crossed her arms. "Why are you here, Drennan?" He hesitated. Then, "I've been dreaming of you." She laughed, bitter. "That's new. You didn't dream of me when you were throwing me away like trash." He flinched. "I felt something," he said. "A pull. Something stronger than the rejection bond. Like it didn't finish. It didn't," Velra said flatly. He froze. "And there's something else, isn't there?" he asked, voice quieter. Velra's wolf rose in her chest, warning her, preparing her. "There's a child," he said. Silence. Velra didn't respond. Drennan took a step forward. "He's mine, isn't he?" "You rejected me," she said coldly. "That includes the consequences." His eyes were wild now. "Let me see him, please." She shook her head. "You didn't want a mate. You don't get to demand a son." Behind her, the barrier shimmered. And then, Against orders, Arvin appeared. He had slipped past Malrek and Cedar. He walked toward the clearing and stood between Velra and Drennan. Velra gasped. "Arvin, no!" But the boy looked up at the Alpha, neither flinching nor afraid. "I know you," Arvin said. Drennan stared down at him, shocked. "You do. You look like me." The silence cracked like ice. Velra's heart stopped. Drennan dropped to his knees, staring at the boy's face. "You're real," he whispered. Arvin tilted his head. "Are you my father?" Velra stepped forward. Arvin, but Drennan nodded. "Yes, and I didn't know. I didn't know you existed. If I had, you would have come." Arvin asked. Velra held her breath. Drennan looked at her, then back at the child. "I would have never let you be alone," he whispered. Velra didn't know what to believe. Didn't know if Drennan had changed or if this was a ploy. But when Arvin reached out and placed his tiny hand over Drennan's heart, she felt the bond hum in her blood. Not a mate bond, not anymore. Something deeper, ancient, a new pact being forged. Chapter 7. The clearing was still as a frozen lake. Drennan remained on his knees, eyes locked with the boy, whose presence had shaken his world. Arvin, with his sharp curiosity and solemn gaze, didn't seem afraid, just thoughtful. As if instinctively weighing the man before him, not as a threat, but as a question. Velra stood behind them, caught in a web of past and present. Her wolf paced inside her, tense and conflicted. Malrech emerged from the treine, followed by Cedar and Corin, their expressions sharp and unreadable. Other members of the hollow circle crept silently into view, summoned by the ripple of energy that had spilled across the forest. The moment Arvin touched Drennan's chest, the entire sanctuary had felt it. Not a threat, a shift, a question of allegiance. Seer moved to Velra's side, her tone low and careful. "You brought him to our gates." Velra's jaw tensed. "He brought himself. That child is one of us if the Alpha threatens him." "He won't," Velra said sharply. "Not while I'm standing." Seer's eyes flicked to the scene before them. "Then the choice is yours, Luna." Velra swallowed. Her title still felt too big for her shoulders. But now, every eye was on her. The Alpha she once loved and lost. The child who carried their blood and the wolves who'd made her whole again. She had to choose. Fight for the family she'd found or let the past unravel what she had built. Drennan rose slowly to his feet. He didn't move toward smartly, perhaps, but his voice carried the weight of a man who'd stopped pretending. "I came here to find what was pulling me. I didn't expect him." His eyes flicked to Arvin. "Or you." Velra's voice was still not taking him. "I'm not here to take anyone." Malrek stepped forward. "Then what do you want?" "Crescent Fong Alpha." Drennan turned toward him. "I want a chance." It was Cedar who barked a laugh. "A chance?" After casting her aside like a broken tooth, Drennan didn't flinch. "I was wrong." "Too late," she spat. But Velra held up a hand. "Let him speak." Sayre stared at her. "Velra, let him." Silence fell again. Drennan met Velra's eyes. "I was young, scared, obsessed with honor. When the council told me your wolf was weak, I believed them. I was cruel. I sent you away, thinking I was saving my pack." He exhaled. "But I was just saving my pride." Velra crossed her arms. "And now I see what I destroyed. I came because something in my soul knew I'd made a mistake. I didn't expect a son, but I know he's mine, and I don't want to take him. I want to know him to earn that right." The wolves around them shifted, murmured. Arvin watched quietly, his small fingers now wrapped around Velas. Sayre stepped forward. "You can't just appear after years and ask for redemption." "I'm not asking for redemption," Drennan said. "I'm asking for truth, for peace. If the Hollow Circle wants to remain hidden, I'll leave. But if there's still a chance to help, to protect them, I'll stand with you." Velra blinked. "Why?" "Because I believe in the boy and in you." That night, the Hollow Circle gathered under the Moonstone Arch, a sacred council. Each wolf, rogue, rejected, castaway, stood in a circle, arms crossed, waiting to decide. Would the Alpha be trusted or banished forever? Velra stood in the center, with Arvin beside her. Malrek stepped forward. "Velra, Luna, we follow your lead, but we must know, where does your heart stand?" She looked down at Arvin, then at the faces of the wolves who had saved her, and then at Drennan, standing quietly outside the ring. Her voice rang clear. "He does not get my forgiveness today. He has not earned my love. But if he proves himself worthy, not to me, but to him." She placed a hand on Arvin's shoulder. "Then maybe one day we will call him brother." The Hollow Circle howled their agreement. Drennan stepped forward, past the arch into the fold, not as Alpha of Crescent Fong, but as a father, humbled, and beside him stood not as the rejected mate, but as the Lunar Reborn. Chapter 8. The forest whispered secrets that night. Winds sliding through trees, owl calls echoing in the deep distance. Yet within the Hollow Circle, silence reigned. Drennan sat by the ceremonial fire, his back straight but his shoulders tight as if bracing for attack. Velra sat opposite him, Arvin asleep in her lap, his fingers curled in the fabric of her shirt. His breathing was steady, and despite the day's upheaval, the boy had fallen asleep with the ease of someone who trusted. That trust burned like a brand on Drennan's heart. "He shouldn't trust me," he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the crackling flames. Velra didn't look up, but he does. Sayre paced just beyond the circle, her steps sharp and deliberate. Corin stood with arms crossed, watching the firelight flicker against the night-dark bark of the trees. Malrek finally broke the stillness. "We should begin." Velra's wolf stirred. They were here for the reckoning, a rare rite older than any known pack, a trial of memory and blood. Drennan had insisted on it. "If I'm to be part of his life, let the Hollow decide by more than words." So now they would witness his truth and measure it. Malrek began, pressing his hand to a carved runestone at the fire's edge. "Blood calls to blood. Truth answers the willing. The bond between past and present must speak." Velra took a deep breath, and her fingers brushed Avon's brow. Her wolf hummed low under her skin, alert and ready. Malrek's eyes glowed faintly as he called the right. "Let the witness speak." Drennan stepped forward. "My name is Drennan Kale, Alpha of Crescent Fong, born to a cursed line. I rejected my mate." He turned to Velra. "I believed the whispers that she was weak, that her wolf was faulty. I saw her as a burden, not a gift. I obeyed my elders and cast her aside." Velra stared at the fire. Arvin stirred in his sleep. Drennan's voice thickened. "I was wrong about her, about myself." The flame flared suddenly blue. Gasps rose from the circle. It meant truth, pure, undeniable. Then Malrek stepped forward and extended his palm toward Arvin. Velra hesitated, but nodded. Malrek touched the boy's forehead gently, murmuring a spell in the old tongue. Light flickered, brief and golden, around the child's body. Then 2 threads of light extended, one to Velra, one to Drennan. A hush fell. Confirmed. Blood pack father. Velra's stomach flipped, emotions roiling between fury and awe. She had known deep down, but to see it was something else entirely. Drennan dropped to one knee. "I ask not for forgiveness," he said, voice shaking. "But let me be part of his life. Let me protect him, even if from a distance." Corin narrowed his eyes. "Even if it means standing against your own pack." Drennan didn't hesitate. "Yes." Ser stepped closer. "Even if it means being marked a traitor." "Yes." "Even if he chooses the Hollow over Crescent Fong." Drennan's voice cracked. "Yes." The fire blazed again, this time green. The flame of oath. Velra finally looked up at him. "You would stay here," she said slowly, as a shadow of the Alpha. You were no power, no pack, just a man, a father." Drennan nodded. "I would." Malrek turned to the circle. "He has spoken and the bond has confirmed." Ser glanced at Velra. "Your voice seals it, Luna." Velra stood slowly, her son stirring against her, and she gave her judgment. "He may stay, not as Alpha, not as mate, but as kin to the Hollow." That night Drennan was marked, not with a title, but with ink. A single band burned into his arm by sacred flame, binding him to the Hollow's protection laws. No violence, no manipulation, no betrayal. And in return, he would be given a place near the edge of the sanctuary. Not within their heart, but close enough to be called if ever needed. Later, as Velra tucked Arvin into bed, he asked quietly, "Does this mean I have a father now?" Velra brushed hair from his brow, her voice soft. "You've always had one." "Will he stay?" She swallowed. "Yes, for now." Arvin smiled sleepily. "Then we don't need to be afraid anymore." Velra stared at him, her heart tight with love and something sharper. She wasn't so sure because somewhere in the shadows of the woods, something darker had awakened, and it wasn't Drennan they needed to fear next. Chapter 9. The first sign was the silence, not the peaceful quiet of nightfall in the hollow, but a suffocating stillness that made the birds flee and the wolves lower their ears. Velra sensed it before she saw it, the way her wolf stiffened beneath her skin, the way the wind stopped moving. It was just past dusk when the sky bled red. A burnished crimson moon, low and swollen, rose above the ridge like a bleeding eye. Cedar cursed softly. "It's too early in the cycle. The blood moon shouldn't rise for another month." Velra stared at the sky, her heart dropping. "This isn't natural." "It's a curse," Malrek said, stepping out from the shadows. His staff was already glowing faintly, one tied to ancient bloodlines. His eyes flicked to Drennan, who had been helping secure new wards near the sanctuary's southern edge. The former Alpha's face darkened. "You think this is my fault?" he asked tightly. "No," Malrek said. "I think it's your ancestors." That night, the Council of the Hollow Circle gathered in the Grove of Bones, an ancient, protected site woven from the ribs of long-dead titans. Velra stood in the center, her palm warm with warning, her gaze locked on Malrek. "Explain," she said. Malrek placed his staff in the center of the circle. The Kale bloodline, Dreenan's lineage, was once bound to a powerful moon curse. Centuries ago, one of their ancestors betrayed the moon priestess who protected the Great Shifter Temple. Velra's stomach turned. What kind of betrayal? Malrek's eyes didn't waver. He sacrificed her in exchange for unbreakable strength, but the moon cursed him. His line would always be haunted by blood moons. Moments of chaos that bring out the worst in their wolves. Velra's breath hitched. And Arvin is a child of that blood. Ser stepped forward. So the curse has passed to him. Malrek nodded solemnly, and it's waking up. Meanwhile, Arvin was asleep under the weeping willow, or so they thought. The boy sat upright, eyes wide open, though unfocused. His lips moved silently. The wind around him twisted unnaturally, and the wolves near the grove began to grow restless. Corin's wolf snapped without warning. One of the twins in the scout unit lunged at his own brother. It took 3 warriors to separate them. Velra ran to her son just as his eyes began to glow. Too bright, too wild. Arvin! She knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. He blinked rapidly. I saw fire. Velra pulled him close. What kind of fire? He trembled. It came from the moon, and it tried to eat me. That night no one slept. The blood moon didn't fade with the rise of the sun. It lingered heavy in the sky, like a curse waiting to be triggered. Drennan found in the training pit, her hands wrapped and bloody from punching the sandbags. "He's in danger," she said before he could speak. "I know," Drennan hesitated. "Let me help." Velra narrowed her eyes. "You think you can control this curse?" "No, but I've seen it before. My father would lose control during blood moons. It destroyed him. But my mother, she kept him tethered." Velra turned to him, voice low. "And you want me to be your tether now?" "No," Drennan said. "I want us to be his." Together, they brought Arvin to the sacred spring. Malrek, Siddur, and the circle's best healers surrounded the edges. The boy stood waist-deep in glowing water, eyes fluttering as the enchantment took hold. Velra and Drennan stood on either side, holding each of his small hands. Malrek began to chant. Symbols in the water glowed. The curse in Arvin's bloodline rose like smoke, visible, red, angry. Velra's mark burned. Drennan's body shook with the effort of staying still, and Arvin screamed. But Velra didn't let go. Neither did Drennan. They poured all their power, all their bloodline, all their intent into their son. Not to erase the curse, but to rewrite it, to bend it, not with domination, but with love. When it was over, Arvin collapsed into Velra's arms, his body warm and trembling, but alive. The blood moon faded at last, and above them, for the first time in days, the stars returned. Later, under those stars, Velra sat beside Drennan as Arvin slept peacefully beside a fire. "What now?" Drennan asked. Velra looked at her son, then at the quiet forest. "Now we teach him," she said, "to carry his power and never let it carry him." Drennan nodded. Together. Velra didn't answer right away, but she didn't pull away either. And in that silence, something broken began to heal. Chapter 10. Velra woke to the scent of dawn and wood smoke. Arvin was still curled beside the fire, one arm around his wolf-shaped pillow, a gift from the hollow pups. His breathing was even, peaceful for now. Velra stood quietly, stretching out her arms, her joints aching with more than exhaustion. The purification ritual had taken more from her than she'd admitted. The threads of the moon's curse still lingered, like spider silk woven through her spirit. But the child had survived it, and so had she. Drennan was already awake. He stood on the overlook beyond the camp, watching the sun begin to rise over the forest canopy. The hollow stretched beneath them, a sanctuary of rebels and survivors. And now, perhaps the only thing standing between Arvin and something ancient that still stirred in the blood. Velra approached cautiously. Drennan didn't look at her as he said, "My mother once told me that our bloodline carried a curse far older than Crescent Fong. She said the moon goddess gave our line power not out of love, but to keep us busy destroying ourselves." Velra stood beside him, arms crossed. "Is that what you believe?" "I didn't used to." He finally looked at her. "But then I saw what our blood did to him. Arvin, a boy who's never known war or caught politics or the cruelty of the council. And yet the blood still wanted to break him." Velra exhaled. "It didn't because he isn't alone." Drennan's voice lowered. "Then we need to protect him from what's coming." Velra nodded. "What is coming?" The answer came sooner than expected. By midday, the scout burst into the hollow, breathless and bleeding. Corin and Sayre rushed to meet him. "Say it again," Sayre growled. The scout gritted his teeth. "They're coming, Crescent Fong, but not just them. An alliance of 4 other packs marching through the Dead Pine Valley headed straight for us." Sayre turned to Velra. "It's war." But Malrich shook his head. "No, it's worse." He threw a scroll to the ground between them. "This decree came by Raven this morning. The High Council has declared Arvin the heir of the Kale bloodline because Drennan has not taken another mate, and his only child is now confirmed." Velra's breath hitched. "They want to claim him. They want to use him," Malrech said. "Breed him into a weapon. Reshape the packs under the Kale curse." Velra felt her wolf roar inside her. "They'll never take him." The hollow prepared. Scouts were doubled. Wards refreshed. Velra took Arvin to the deep caves where moonlight didn't touch and old magic still slept. She pressed her hand against the door carved from obsidian. "Where are we going?" Arvin asked softly. "To see the ones who remember," she said. Inside, the oldest wolves of the hollow waited. Wolves with faded coats and haunted eyes. Velra stepped forward. "I ask for their protection." The elders exchanged looks. "Who is this child?" one rasped. Velra didn't hesitate. "He is Arvin Velra, born of betrayal and hope, carrier of curse and change." The oldest of them, a woman with one blind eye and silver skin, reached for Arvin's hand. She held it gently, then turned to Velra. "He will bring the packs to their knees, or to salvation. You must choose where he stands." That night, the fire circle was lit brighter than ever. Velra stood before the hollow circle. Cloak swept over her shoulders like a queen of shadows. "I will not let them claim him," she said. Sir nodded. "Then we fight." But Drennan stepped forward. "We do not fight as rogues." Velra narrowed her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" Drennan dropped to one knee. "Make him your heir." Gasps rippled. Velra blinked. "What?" "The Crescent Fong only sees bloodlines, titles, legacy." His voice was steady. "Make him your heir, not mine. Let him be raised as the future alpha of the Hollow." Velra's heart pounded. Malrech stepped forward. "Such a claim would defy every law of the council." "Then let it," Drennan said. Velra's eyes shone with emotion. "Are you sure?" Drennan nodded. "I rejected my mate. I will not reject my son." The Malk was made that night. Arvin stood under the twin moons, his palm pressed to Velus. Silver ink burned into his skin, glowing bright as the Hollow's oath wove into his blood. Heir of the shadow-born hollow, Malrek Inid, child of strength and sorrow, may you walk in truth, may you rule with fire. The wolves howled, the earth trembled, and in the distance, beyond the veil of magic, the invading packs marched on. Unaware that they were about to face not a boy, but a king in the making. Chapter 11. The dawn was sickly when it broke over the hollow. Pale, dust-choked, the kind of sky that told of coming war. Arvin stood in the center of the glade, barefoot on cold grass. The new sigil burned faintly on his skin, a crescent within a flame, the mark of the shadow-born heir. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with understanding. He was no longer just a child. He was legacy, and he was hunted. Velra watched from a distance. Every fiber of her being screamed to pull him back, to keep him safe, hidden. But Arvin hadn't flinched when Malrek inked the ritual mark. He hadn't cried when the wolves howled in his name. He hadn't backed away when told he was now the future of a pack forged in exile. "Do you regret it?" Drennan asked beside her. "No," Velra said softly, "but I grieve for the part of his childhood that won't come back." They stood in silence for a long time. Then Drennan added, "He's strong because of you." Velra gave him a side glance. "He's strong because I had no choice." At midday, the air changed again. A wall of wolves had reached the far Rigial line. 5 packs, dozens of alphas, and at their center, robed and masked, stood Councilm Thorn, the executioner of rogue-blooded heirs. Velra's spine tensed. She'd heard the legends. How Thorn could sever a soul's bond from the moon goddess with just a touch. How he'd broken entire packs by cursing their heirs to madness. Corin's wolf growl. "They come bearing laws, but burst for conquest." Sir snarled, "Then we give them none." The hollow readied itself. Shields lined the tree hollows. Enchanted traps were laid across the gorge. Archers took up positions in the canopy. The earth had been taught to defend itself over generations, but it was still not enough. Not against 5 organized packs with siege magic. So Velra did the one thing she'd vowed never to do. She called the Whispered Ones. Deep in the ruins of the old temple, where light never touched, Velra carved blood into stone. She whispered the ancient name that had not been spoken aloud in over a century, and something answered. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. A figure stepped forward, robed in writhing smoke and flickers of violet flame. "You dare summon me, Luna of the Hollow?" it said in a voice like cracked stone and thunder. Velra lifted her chin. "I offer you a pact." "No, you offer desperation." Her jaw clenched, "Then call it what it is." The entity studied her. "For what do you beg?" Velra didn't flinch. "A night, one night where the hollow cannot be touched by death." The entity's laugh was like a collapsing mountain. "And what will you give me in return?" Velra's heart thudded. She reached into her cloak and drew a vial. Inside it, Arvin's first blood from the air marking. The entity's eyes gleamed. "Agreed," it whispered. The vial vanished from her hands, and the shadows receded. That evening, Thorn's army reached the boundary. Velra stood alone on the front cliff. Arvin was behind the final line, hidden beneath protective enchantments. Councilm Thorn raised his voice. "Return the Kale heir to us, and the hollow shall be spared." Velra stepped forward. "I speak for the hollow, and the answer is no." Thorn's mask glinted. "Then you declare war on the unified packs." Velra's voice rang clear. No, I declare war on your blood-soaked lies." He raised a hand. The armies howled. But then the sky turned black. Midnight shadows poured from the treetops. A dome of shimmering light erupted from the old wards. The soldiers screamed, not in pain, but in terror, because something moved between the trees faster than sound, something that didn't obey the moon. The hollow did not strike. The hollow simply survived. The enemy turned on itself, confused, cursed, lost, just as the entity had promised. One night, free from death for the hollow. By dawn, Thorn's army was gone, scattered, shamed, unmade. Velra collapsed near the spring, shaking with exhaustion. Arvin ran to her, clutching her arm. "You kept us safe," he whispered. She stared at him, this boy with two old eyes, and said softly, "No, Arvin, we did." And high in the hills, Drennan watched the horizon with narrowed eyes, because though Thorn had fled, something worse had arrived. Velra had paid the price, and now the Whispered Ones would come to collect. Chapter 12. The Whispered Ones do not forget. That was the first thing Velra dreamed of as she drifted into sleep, if it could be called sleep at all. In her vision, she was standing beneath the hollow, sacred moon tree, its branches stripped bare, its bark cracked open like broken ribs. Blood dripped from the tips of the limbs, and the air was thick with a humming so ancient it had no beginning. From the dark, a voice coiled around her soul. "You promised." Velra jolted upright in her bedroll, heart hammering, sweat pouring from her skin. The room around her was empty. No shadows, no entity, just silence and the soft flutter of her cloak drying beside the hearth. But she knew they were watching now, waiting. That morning, Drennan found her pacing the perimeter of the sanctuary grounds, wards humming faintly beneath her bare feet. "You feel it too?" she murmured before he could say anything. He nodded. "The air, it's off, too still. They're coming for what I gave." Drennan swallowed. "You gave them Arvin's blood." Velra turned to him and her voice was iron. "I gave them a drop, and in return they gave us a night of salvation. I would do it again." Drennan didn't argue, but he looked toward the hill where Arvin trained with Sadir and the Hollow Scouts, and his jaw tightened. "We need to prepare, not just for the Council or the Pax, but for what you invited into this realm." In the heart of the Hollow, Malric summoned the circle. Velra stepped into the chamber like a shadow queen, her presence unignorable. Corin and Sadir flanked her tense. "I won't pretend I didn't make the deal," she said, "but it bought us our survival." "And now," Malric asked, "what will they want next?" Velra hesitated. "I don't know." Malric stepped forward. "Then we must find out. The Whispered Ones don't deal in favors. They deal in debt. And the moment they decide the Hollow owes more than what you gave, they'll come to collect." Velra finished. The old shaman nodded. "Then let them try." That night, the hollow stars vanished. Velra stood at the edge of the Moonstone Grove, where the trees twisted in unnatural arcs. She felt it again, that tug beneath her skin, the pull of old packs. A shimmer rippled through the air, and the entity appeared. Not fully, not yet. Just eyes glowing violet watching. "You offered blood," it whispered. "We drank it. Now we thirst." Velra's jaw clenched. "What do you want?" "Your heir," it said softly. "The child of curse and choice. His power sings louder than even you can hear." Velra's breath hitched. "No, he does not belong to you. He is mine," she growled. "He is ours. the shadows hissed. Back in the hollow, Arvin paused mid-step. During training, he looked up at the moon, eyes narrowing. Something's listening. Sarah called out, "Focus, boy." But Arvin didn't hear her. He turned and ran toward the ward line, straight into the woods. Velra sensed it the moment he crossed the boundary. She sprinted. No command, no warning. Just instinct. Drennan and Corin were right behind her. They found Arvin standing in the clearing where the Whispered Ones first spoke to Velra. But this time, they had form. Cloaked in violet and black, woven from shadows and bones. The figures stood in a perfect ring around the boy. Arvin didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared at them. "You've been waiting," he said, his voice calm. Velra burst through the trees. "Get away from him." The shadows turned but made no move. "You made a pact," the lead figure whispered. "He is part of the exchange." "No," Velra growled, "he's not yours." Arvin turned to her slowly. "Mother, I think I hear them." Velra's breath caught. "What are they saying?" she asked. "That I'm the door," he said, "and the key." Drennan stepped forward, fury radiating from him. "I'll kill every one of you." The lead shadow tilted its head. "You can try." Velra reached for her mark. Moonfire lit across her palm, but Arvin stepped between them. "No, Arvin." Velra shouted, but the boy looked up at the creatures. "If I give you me, what do you do?" The entity was silent. Velra moved to grab him, but the shadows were faster. A pulse of magic rippled through the grove, freezing everyone in place except Arvin. The shadows circled him slowly. Then the lead one leaned in. "You are not ours." "Not yet, but you are close." Arvin stared. "Then I will make sure I never am." He drew his claws and slashed his own palm, letting his blood fall onto the earth. The grove trembled. The shadows recoiled. "You cannot command us," the entity shrieked. Arvin's eyes glowed. "No, but I can reject you." The earth split, the shadows screamed, and the boy glowed like a shard of the full moon itself. Velra broke free of the spell, running forward just as the grove sealed shut, trapping the entities behind a wall of glowing vines and silver flame. Arvin collapsed into her arms, panting, "They won't come back." He whispered. Velra held him tight. "How do you know?" His voice was barely audible. "Because I told them who I am." Later that night, as the hollow lit its torches and celebrated their survival once again, Velra stood on the cliff overlooking the wild lands. Drennan joined her, his expression unreadable. "He made a choice," he said. Velra nodded. "One even I wasn't ready for." Drennan looked at her. "He's more than air, Velra. He's a force." She didn't answer right away, then said softly, "He's our future." Drennan put a hand on her shoulder, and he just might save us all. Chapter 13. The Rise of the Shadowborn Alpha. The Alpha rejected her, then found her secret pack in the shadows. The Hollow had never known a dawn like this one. No mist, no dread, no echoes of fear weaving through the trees. Just the hush of something new. And in that stillness, Arvin Kale stood at the center of the glade, beneath the silver leaf tree that only bloomed once every 7 years. Only when the moon goddess whispered, "Change into the bones of the land." Today it bloomed, and so did he. Velra watched from the ridge above. Her cloak billowed softly in the morning breeze. Her hair braided back in the style of Luna warriors from the ancient north. Sir stood at her side, arms crossed. "You know what this means?" the older warrior muttered. Velra nodded. "He isn't a boy anymore. He never really was." They watched as Arvin stepped into the circle of stones, the same place where she had once stood, uncertain and trembling, pledging to lead a pack that didn't want her. He didn't tremble. He didn't falter. He stepped forward with purpose. The entire hollow surrounded him. Old wolves, orphaned pups, broken warriors, and mystics with moonfire eyes. Corin raised a silver staff. Naurek lit the sacred torches. And the pack howled, not in mourning, in reverence. Velra descended the ridge at last, stepping into the circle. Arvin turned to her. "Do you accept the title placed upon you?" she asked, her voice solemn but proud. Arvin's eyes gleam, not just with wolf light, but with human heart. "I do." "Do you swear to lead not with dominance, but with balance? Not with cruelty, but with courage?" "I swear." "Do you take the mantle of Alpha of the Hollow, not as a crown, but as a calling?" "I do." Velra reached forward and pressed the mark of the hollow to his collarbone. A smear of sacred ash mixed with the blood of sacrifice and the milk of moonflowers. The mark burned gold, and when Arvin raised his head, the pack dropped to their knees. He was the youngest alpha the hollow had ever seen, but not one wolf questioned it. Because in the time since Velra had found him, half-starved, trembling in the snow, he had walked through shadows, spoken to forgotten gods, endured the betrayal of blood, and still chosen light. And now he stood, not as an heir, but as a leader. Drennan approached from the rear of the gathering. His eyes met across the crowd. No words were needed, just a look, and understanding passed between them. Their son had become what neither of them had ever dared to dream: whole, powerful, free. That night, the fires blazed bright across the hollow. Packs from distant territories began to arrive, not in chains, not in battle, but in hope. The Kale bloodline, long feared, long hunted, had birthed something new, a line unbound by the old ways. Velra sat at the edge of the glade, sipping from a carved moonstone cup, watching her son laugh with young warriors and bless pups with ash-smudged palms. "He'll change everything," Sayre murmured, taking a seat beside her. Velra smiled. "That's what terrifies me, and also what gave her peace." In the shadows of the grove, the ward line shimmered faintly. One last whisper stirred from the hidden veil. But this time, it did not speak in hunger. It simply bowed to the boy who had said no, to the Alpha who had rewritten fate, to the Shadowborn who had chosen light. The end. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who'd love this, and subscribe to Nightbond Narratives, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments below which part of the world you are watching from. Also, tell me which part of the story you like the most. Compilation of a video of an audiobook takes a lot of time and effort. So, if you see any ambiguity, please ignore it. I hope you will appreciate my effort.